All right, y'all, so we just tried to crank up the Debonair and we could not get our boost pump to come up. In the past, normally when we turn it on, we're getting somewhere between 16 and 18 PSI, and it was having this slow like build up to get going, and we were only getting a maximum of like 10 PSI. The problem is that I have scheduled to go fly with my family cross country. We're gonna go spring break in Santa Fe for the next like week, and we're supposed to leave in a couple of days. If we can't get this fixed, then I can't take the airplane. So I'm gonna get with our A&P, we're gonna take a look at it, we're gonna rip it apart, see what we can find, if we can identify what the problem is. If we can't fix this problem, our only option is gonna be to try to fly commercial, and I have no idea what those tickets are gonna cost last minute like this. Looks like for a 10-hour flight and a 15-hour flight to get to and from Santa Fe from here is gonna wind up costing us $2,000 a ticket. Here's another one for $1,600 times 4. Now you're looking at $8,000-ish. If we can't get this fixed, our spring break is canceled. So I'm hoping that we can figure out what the problem is and fix it before we gotta go. Now I'm just watching Josh do work on the airplane. Normally I try to help a little bit.
Every good big project has a project supervisor.
That's right, he's the project manager. How am I doing, boss?
Better than I could. All right, so we've dug out the piece that we think is the culprit. This sits just below our fuel selector valve, and there's actually a just electric-driven pump or electric-driven motor with a fuel pump here. And what this is this is a backup to our engine-driven pump. So our engine-driven pump is primarily what's used to feed the engine fuel. And this is used for either initial starts, if we need to pull fuel from one of our tanks to the center tank or to the engine, or if our primary engine-driven fuel pump runs out, this is the only thing that's going to keep the engine running. So flying my family over the Rockies to Santa Fe, definitely something that I want to be working before we take it. Hopefully we can find a replacement for this in time, get it installed before we try to head out of here in a few days.
Where's that fire extinguisher? Just in case. No, seriously though. We got a lot of fuel dripping around. Let me make sure that I got access to that. All right. Fire extinguisher just in case.
All right, bags are on both. Drops clean, that. We got the peanut gallery out there watching us.
Yep.
So.
Prop clear.
Power run on it, make sure it's not leaking. And then...
Yep. Yeah, anytime you have to say, like, let's make sure we get the fire extinguisher just in case is probably not the best day, huh? All right, so we think we know what the problem is. We put the new fuel pump in, we put the new motor in, and turned it on, had the exact same problem. So we switched left tank, right tank, having the same problem. Finally, what we wound up doing is we swapped to the tip tank, and the fuel pressure came right up, which means that there's probably a bad O-ring somewhere in our fuel selector valve for both the left and right main fuel lines. And so we're gonna take the entire fuel line out, we're gonna put a new one, fix the O-rings, put it back in and see how it works. The problem is we're gonna dump fuel all over the place when we do this. So we're gonna try and find something to catch that fuel now. It's not cheap. We're not gonna use that in the airplane, we'll use it to clean it. Oh no. Now we're only gonna get what we're gonna get. So status report. We pulled the fuel selector valve off, pull out all the O-rings, and the O-rings looked okay, but they were flush against the plastic. So what we're doing is we're swapping out the O-rings, we're gonna put new O-rings in, ops test it, and then hopefully it'll work so we can make our trip to Santa Fe. We'll see. We got the engine running and it ran just fine. We did a few test flights before we put the whole family in it, just to make sure it was gonna work out all right. Once we got it good and we felt really confident in the airplane, we loaded up the family and flew to Santa Fe. The flight to Santa Fe went great. In Santa Fe, we went and checked out a bunch of different stuff. Really got the kids super tired, so we went to an alpaca farm. The kids loved playing with the alpacas there. We went up to Ski Santa Fe and took the kids skiing, and they had a really, really good time. After our spring break trip was over, we decided to pack the family back up and head back home. Packed up the airplane. The first 45 minutes to an hour of the flight was going just fine. And then when we were in the middle of nowhere, literally in the middle of nowhere in New Mexico, I had an issue. I looked down and I realized that my alternator was no longer charging my battery. What I did, as soon as I realized that the alternator wasn't working anymore, I immediately shut off all of my avionics, my battery, my lights, everything, to try and conserve battery power, because I couldn't put the gear down. I didn't really want to put the gear down that far away from where I was trying to land at.
We can get our avionics on. I can get a radio. I got the gear and flaps down. That's the most important part.
About 5 to 10 minutes before getting to the airport that we were going to land at, what I wound up doing is I turned my battery on, I left everything else off, and I dropped the gear, because that was the most important thing. Got the gear down safely, dropped the flaps where I wanted the flaps to be. Once all that was good, I turned on the inner cockpit so that we could talk to each other.
Hutchins County, November 425 Tango's 5 miles out to the west with a pending electrical failure. Be my last radio transmission. I'll be landing runway 17, Hutchins County.
When you said I have the gear and flaps down, that's the good part. Is there a chance
Yeah,
that
so my priority was getting...
Does the battery control that?
The battery controls the gear and flaps. So that was the most... Before I turned anything else back on, I turned the battery on, and I immediately put the gear and flaps down to make sure that we got the gear and flaps down.
Oh. Okay.
All right, runway 17.
So fortunately, we were able to get the airplane down on the ground. We landed at Hutchinson County Airport, which is just north of Amarillo, Texas. Once I opened the cowling, I immediately knew what the problem was. We had a cable from the alternator that had come loose. And so I called Josh and was able to just strip that wire and reconnect it. We started the engine up after charging the battery, and the alternator is working just fine. Thankfully, we weren't stuck in Amarillo there for another couple days on our way to try and come back from spring break, and we were able to get the aircraft started and come back home. And overall, it was a really great experience. We had a great spring break. It was a really good first family vacation, despite the minor hiccups along the way.